Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Audio Fanfics and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto awakened a powerful bloodline during the Chunin exams? Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. The fox was gone, non-existent, like it had never been there. The Yondaime was gone as well, his spirit departed for the belly of the Shinigami. He left behind a wife who followed him into the abyss and a son only a few hours old that he had entrusted to jail the most fearsome of beasts. Truly, it was a sad day in Konohagakure. Old Sarutobi, the Sandaime Hokage, stood with a small blonde baby in his arms. The babe slept soundly, unmindful of the gathering of elders that were assembled to decide his fate. Sarutobi did not know why the fools had even gathered. The boy's fate was already decided. And Sarutobi meant to keep his destiny unaltered. He listened as the council bickered back and forth, some for killing the baby, some for saving it, honoring the wishes of their dead Hokage. This was a trying time for the village and patience was running thin. Even for one of infinite patience like Sarutobi. He'd never had to raise his voice before to get a point across. One does not attain the title, God of Shinobi, by being loud and spontaneous. Ninja are calm, collected, silent, and deadly. All these things encompassed what Sarutobi stood for. What set him apart from the pack was his high level of intelligence. And that intelligence would grant him a successor and save the village in this time and in future times. No one noticed as he rose from his seat, the babe still sleeping peacefully in his arms. Enough. Be silent. The room quieted immediately and even the small bundle in his arms woke and stared at him reverently. But no sound did it make. He smiled down at the blonde wonder and then turned his gaze back to the council. I have sat and listened to your nonsense long enough. This child will not be slain. He will not be made into a mindless weapon. He will not be used. He is a child of Konoha and he holds within him the most powerful of beasts. He deserves our respect above all. A nameless council member, one of the civilians rose. But Lord Hokage, the Kyuubi could break free at any moment. Knowledge of the seal says that its soul is bound to the boys and that upon the boy's death it will die with him. Would it not be best to kill him now and avoid any future issues? Sarutobi narrowed his eyes at the civilian and spoke in a level voice. This child shall not be killed. His own life is a sacrifice. The Yondaime chose him to hold the Kyuubi and he believed that his people would see this boy for what he is. And what is he? A hero. A Jinchuriki. He is a living sacrifice and a living testament to a human's tenacious hold on life. I myself will ensure that this boy serves Konoha. I might love the people of this village, but if the leaders themselves can't tell the difference between a harmless child and the most murderous of all demons, then how can I trust the villagers to let him live a peaceful life? He lifted the child and held it out for all to see. The blonde babe giggled and flapped its arms merrily. Sarutobi allowed a small smile to cross his face. Now then, look upon this child and tell me where the malice is. Where is the unbridled hatred and rage that the Kyuubi exuded? Where is the fear that should be present in all of you if he were the Kyuubi? But it could be a trick of the Kyuubi to lure us into false hope. It could be pretending to be harmless. Sarutobi frowned and wrapped the baby back up in its swaddling clothes. And how exactly is that child different from any other newborn? What newborn doesn't look upon the world with wondering eyes? This baby has been born into a cold, harsh world on the worst night of our village's history. For this, he will be ostracized and hated if he is allowed to mingle amongst the villagers, and I will not have that. I will ensure the boy grows to be a ninja of exceptional quality. I will ensure that he is pure of heart and loyal to the village. And how do you mean to ensure all that? Sarutobi smiled at the speaker. Of course, It would be the old war hawk Danzo. How he hated the man. What he said next would make or break the boy's future, but he would not back down. This baby, this small little blonde child you see before you, is my chosen successor. I will train him in the ways of the ninja and the ways of a Hokage. He will lead the village when I step down. Hyuga Hiyashi rose from his seat and walked to stand in front of Sarutobi. The old man's grip on the baby grew tenser as the pale-eyed man gazed down at the infant. The babe stared up into Hiyashi's eyes with wonder and reached out with small hands towards the man's face. Hiyashi's gaze softened and he stuck a finger out for the little child to latch onto. It gripped the digit and cooed happily. And Hiyashi smiled, shocking those gathered. I see that you have chosen a strong child indeed to be your successor, Lord Hokage. I, Hyuga Hiyashi, will trust your decision and will help you in any way I can. To Sarutobi's surprise, the rest of the clan heads stood and offered their support, all except Uchiha Fugaku. He voiced his opinion that he would not support such an endeavor and that the rest were fools. Seeing that he was outvoted, however, he went along with the decision reluctantly, but not without provisions. Should the child ever prove dangerous, I, along with the rest of the Uchiha clan, will not hesitate to bring him down. This I swear. The village must come before a man's wishes. Sarutobi nodded and Fugaku left the chamber without another word. He had said his piece and knew he was no longer needed. One by one, the leaders of the clans came forward to see the baby and offer their support and help should the child need training beyond what Sarutobi gave him. Once all were gone, it left just Hiyashi, Homura, Kaharu, and Sarutobi. The two elder advisors to the Hokage watched as Hiyashi approached Sarutobi and gazed down at the child again. Do you really intend to keep him from the village? A child needs interaction with those his age, otherwise he will grow up too quickly. You've seen how those en route and how young prodigies like Uchiha Itachi act. They have no personality at all, they're like machines. Do you intend to send the child to the academy at some point? Sarutobi rubbed his chin and looked toward the ceiling, as if it would have the answers. I have not thought that far ahead yet, truthfully. I will keep him in my household for the first few years of his life, giving him a family life and a stable environment. I will introduce a law that specifically states that those old enough to remember the Kyuubi attack will not speak of it to the younger generation, further giving him a chance at a normal life. We both know this child's life will never be normal. Sarutobi's eyes drooped and a small, sad smile came across his face. The bundle in his arms yawned and fluttered its eyes. I know that, but he deserves at least a happy home life. My family and servants will care for him when I cannot. He will at least know the love of family. He will know that, at least to a few, he is wanted. I, for one, will not let the Yondaime's wishes go unnoticed. Nor will I. If you need any help, just send for me. Both men looked down at the small child and smiled sad, mournful smiles. Hiyashi reached out and stroked the infant's hair. He looks just like him, you know. Yes, he does. I don't believe you ever said what his name was. Sarutobi's eyes twinkled and he pulled the baby back against his chest. His father named him Uzumaki Naruto, just before he passed on. I intend to make it a name known throughout the nations. The will of fire will burn the brightest in this young one. Hiyashi nodded and left to assess the damage done to his family. Sarutobi nodded to his advisors and left for his home. He nodded to himself as he walked. Yes, this child will be the living embodiment of the will of fire. I will ensure that, come hell or high water, this child will be a legend. Sarutobi sighed as he walked in through his door. Half of his compound was demolished. Miraculously, the living quarters were untouched and thus, at least his family and servants had a place to sleep. It would take a while to rebuild the village to its former glory, but that was for another day. For the moment, he had to introduce the family's newest member to them. He silently wished his son Asuma was there at the moment, but that was neither here nor there. The servant who ushered him in smiled and looked to the bundle in his arms. Sarutobi's eyes narrowed when the man's widened and he waited for the servant to say the wrong thing. Is that him? Yes, it is. The servant got a speculative look on his face and then smiled at Sarutobi, disarming the old man's cold look. The Yondaime wished him to be seen as a hero, correct? Therefore, in my eyes, he is a beloved hero. You need not fear, master. I will ensure that he is treated with respect in this household. Sarutobi smiled at his most trusted servant and nodded. I thank you for that, Aoi. It is most appreciated. Do me a favor, would you? Gather the family and all the servants to the main room. I need to introduce our newest family member. Aoi's eyes widened and he stared awestruck at the babe. You mean? Yes. He will be raised in this household. Now go. Hurry. Yes, master. At once. Sarutobi sighed and took a seat as Aoi rushed off. It wouldn't be long now till the family began to file in. He readjusted the baby, took a deep breath, and closed his eyes. He was old, getting on in years. He should be enjoying retirement now, not taking over the mantle he had given up only a short time ago. But there were none better qualified to take the job, and better him than some young fool who would do something stupid. Or an old war hawk who would like nothing better than to try to invade another country, even while the village was disabled. A small tear wound its way down the crevices on Sarutobi's face. It wasn't fair that one as young as Namikaze Minato had died. He was in the prime of life, a new father, a loving husband, and a damn fine Hokage. But fate is a fickle mistress and the young man had everything taken from him in an instant. All in service of a village that would just as soon see his legacy dead, his family gone, all while singing his praises. Sarutobi wondered if they ever thought of the hypocrisy of it all. His eyes opened when he heard the shuffle of feet and opened his eyes to see the face of his son, peering down at the sleeping form of Naruto. His eyes softened when he saw his son's newlywed wife standing behind him. Hello, you two. Come to pay your respects to an old man. Sarutobi's son laughed and watched as his wife picked up the baby. He noticed that his father gave the child up reluctantly, no doubt because of the tension in the air surrounding the child's origins and identity. Don't worry, father. Eri will not harm the boy. In fact, she seems rather fond of him already. How could I not? He's so precious. And look at those cute little marks on his face. What are those? A birthmark? Sarutobi sighed and smiled at her. You could say that. They mark him as the container of the Kyuubi. And they'll stay with him for life. He watched as Eri tensed and held the boy at arm's length for a moment, before taking him back to her and stroking his feathery soft hair. I don't care. He's just a small child that was born at the wrong time. If you need me to, I'll raise him as my own. It'll give me good practice for when Yahiko and I have our own child. Sarutobi smiled and allowed himself to relax in the plush chair, as his son and daughter-in-law cooed and lavished praise over the baby. He watched with a bemused expression as the servants filtered in one by one, and the females all took a turn holding him before he ended up back in Eri's arms. The old Hokage grunted as his bones creaked when he rose from the plushy chair and put his hands behind his back. Now that he's been passed around a few times, I'd like to thank all of you for welcoming young Naruto to our home. He will be living here with us and will be raised among us. He is to be given the respect he deserves, but do not spoil him. Do not treat him as royalty. He is to grow to be a humble child, one filled with generosity and kindness. Yahiko turned his head to gaze at the now sleeping baby in his wife's arms. So he is to be a Sarutobi? No, He is to be Uzumaki Naruto. I have decided that he will be my chosen heir for the title of Hokage. A small murmur swept the room and Aoi, ever the loyal servant, felt compelled to ask if this was the right decision. Sarutobi smiled at his most trusted servant and fished his pipe out of his pocket. Of course it is. The boy is destined for great things, so why not the greatest thing of all? The village may not like him, may even hate him, but they will respect him. Of this I swear on our clan's name. He will be the epitome of a ninja in every way, and when he rises to take the mantle I shall raise and train him to take, he will be the best. He will surpass us all. Eri smoothed the baby's hair and grinned when he fidgeted and turned his face away. Father, I want to raise this child. I want to show him that though the world may hate him, there are those who will always be there for him. That's very good, Eri. You and Yahiko, along with everyone else, will show this boy love and how to be a good person. And you, father, what will you be showing him? Why, Yahiko, I thought I made that clear. I will be showing him everything about being a Hokage. I plan for him to be helping me with sorting paperwork by the time he is 6 or 7, signing documents by 8, and perhaps assigning missions by the time he is 10. You can't be serious, master. He will be much too young to do such things, and what of the academy? A boy should have friends his age. I've already thought of that, Aoi. And he will have friends his age. I believe that Hyuga Hiyashi has a child due to be born soon, and it should make a wonderful playmate. The other clan heads all have children to be born soon or have already had children. Don't worry, he won't be a recluse. I'll make sure of that myself. Yahiko, while happy his father had thought this through so far, was still unsettled by one detail. And the council. They are greedy, power-hungry fools and may attempt to harm the boy. Sarutobi's eyes flashed dangerously, and Yahiko was somewhat sorry he'd spoken up. They will do nothing. If they know what is good for them, they will leave the boy alone and under my care. Minato would want his son to be cared for, and damn it all if I won't see his wishes honored. All eyes in the household grew wide, and Sarutobi cursed himself for losing his cool in an impassioned speech. Eri's eyes were the widest and most tear-filled. So, he is the Yondaime's son. He looks just like him now that I think about it. So tragic that this poor baby loses his parents and all that is entitled to him the day he is born. And I expect you all to keep that secret. You don't want to know what the punishment may be. His father had many enemies, outside the village and within, and I won't have him pay for his father's endeavors. She sat down in a chair and held little Naruto close to her bosom as the tears streamed down her face. It just isn't fair, father. And the fact that most of this village would rather see him dead, it sickens me. Eri, it sickens me too. But that is why we must work to make them see his virtues and not the sins that are not his own. His life will be a constant uphill battle, and we must be there to help him every step of the way. Yahiko sat on the arm of the chair and put an arm around his wife's shoulders. To think that we would help raise a national hero's son, it's like something out of a fairy tale. The tragedy of a lost prince, orphaned at birth, who comes to be found by kind, benevolent, childless people who only want to see him raised into a fine young man. Sarutobi smiled at his son's wistful thinking. Yahiko had always been the more studious and philosophical of the two boys and was sure to instill his knowledge and love of literature into Naruto. Not that Sarutobi wouldn't beat the finer points of linguistics and books into his head, by force if necessary. I'm happy to hear that you feel that way, Yahiko. Now, it is late and we must all retire for the night. Eri looked at her father-in-law with big soulful eyes. Father, may I keep him for the night? Sarutobi laughed as he headed for his room. Tomorrow would be an eventful day for Konohagakure. Of course you may, Eri. He's your son now after all. I'll have a crib commissioned in the morning. He didn't see the smile on her face when he told her Naruto was her son, but he could literally feel the warmth on his back. Tomorrow, I must face the council again and detail my plans. Soon, this world will see the will of fire again and will know its awesome might. Sarutobi awoke the next morning feeling just a little more lighthearted than usual. Despite the obvious difficulties he would face that day, he was happy knowing that the house was livelier than normal. One would be correct in saying that the small bundle of sunshine he'd brought home had been a shining spot in the bleak aftermath of the Kyuubi's attack. As he walked down the halls, he nodded and smiled at the servants, who returned both gestures with an unusual flair. He wondered about that until he came to the kitchen, where Eri was feeding the baby and several bottles were stacked beside her. The poor girl looked dismayed and immediately looked to the old man for answers. She was no expert in children, but this wasn't normal. Sarutobi laughed as he took a seat and was served his breakfast. I see you've run afoul of the infamous Namikaze appetite. Don't worry, dear, it's perfectly normal for him. But father, it isn't normal for a baby to eat so much. Where is he putting it all? That old familiar chuckle rumbled in Sarutobi's throat and he wiped a tear away from his eye. Oh Eri, you just don't know yet. Wait until he learns to walk. You won't be able to keep up with him. Trust me when I say he's storing up energy for later. The girl looked skeptical but kept silent as the blonde finished off yet another bottle. She sighed as he whined, obviously for more. Sighing, she got up to make another. Hopefully, the newborn's appetite would abate with the coming years. She apparently had forgotten that the more you grow, the more you need to keep going. Sarutobi laughed with great vigor as he headed to his office. It seemed the grocery bills would be very high for the Sarutobi clan in the coming years. The old man sat eyeing them all warily as they filed in and took their seats. He glared at his unwanted rival Danzo and made a sign for the door to be shut. Standing before the assembly, he knocked out his pipe before putting in a fresh blot of tobacco and lighting it. Anything to help calm his nerves was appreciated. He took a deep draft as the smoke filled his lungs and exhaled slowly. The flavor was exquisite. Slowly, he opened his eyes and coughed to get attention. We are gathered today to address several issues. I realize that most of you have pressing matters with your clans and families, so I will not detain you long. I merely wish to say that until the village is back in order, we will suspend all missions for a while. Not for long though, we can't afford to look too weak. Now, are there any concerns you would like to address? Inuzuka Sume, ever the eloquent lady, voiced her opinion. Yeah, I have one. It concerns the young pup you were carrying last night. What became of him and what will become of him? Ah, straight to the point as usual, Sume. I have told you already, he is under my protection and I am going to raise him to be a loyal Konoha ninja and my successor. As of now, I am instigating a law that will make it a crime punishable by death to mention that Naruto carries within him the Kyuubi. It will not be discussed and will not be tolerated. This will be released to the mass populace and made so that they understand the severity of the law. I will not tolerate attacks or unnecessary enmity against my apprentice. His eyes swept the room and he leveled a glare at those he knew to be problem causers. If there are any objections to my plan, then by all means, speak now or forever hold your peace. But know this, I will not change my mind. Your grievances are duly noted, but that boy caused none of them. And you won't have to face just me. My entire household has sworn to protect the boy and raise him as one of our own. Before any could protest, Hyuga Hiyashi stood and bowed his head to the Hokage. I, Hyuga Hiyashi, swear upon my clan that we will honor the Yondaime's wishes and protect the boy. Any help needed we will offer. Yeah, I, Inuzuka Sume, swear upon my clan's honor that the pup will be protected. We'll teach him whatever is needed. TCH, troublesome. We of the Inoshika Cho trio offer our protection of the boy. Sarutobi raised his eyebrow at Shikato and sighed. Do you really speak for all three of you, Nara? Yes, I do. Whatever one decides is for the best, the others will follow. And we always followed the Yondaime's wishes. Sarutobi nodded and watched as the Abarames swore to protect Naruto with whatever necessary means. The lesser clans followed suit until it came to the Uchihas. Sarutobi frowned, knowing that Fugaku was a foolish man and wouldn't offer anything. I, Uchiha Fugaku, will not offer my clan's protection to this thing. I have offered my views on this fallacy and will not offer my support to the cause. Hiyashi turned cold eyes to Fugaku. So you would not honor a dead man, a Hokage and fellow ninjas, last wish. That is, troubling, Uchiha. Most troubling. And I say that letting that monster run loose is troubling Hyuga. We've never seen eye to eye, so it is no surprise that we differ on this opinion. I choose to see the truth while the rest of you are blinded by this old man's optimism concerning a supposedly innocent child. But who's to say it's truly innocent? Danzo nodded to his fellow naysayers' words and gave Sarutobi a smirk. It would be tough to wiggle out of that argument. Sarutobi, much to his chagrin, didn't look rattled in the least. Tell me, Fugaku, did you trust the Yondaime? Yes. Did you believe in him as a leader? Yes. Did you believe him a more capable leader than me? Without doubt. Your time has passed. I see. So you believed in the Yondaime, followed his rule when he was alive, but failed to trust him in death. Fugaku looked confused and asked what Sarutobi meant. That seal was designed by our beloved Yondaime Hokage, and as such, it would fall to reason that you would trust in the man to know what he is doing. You have just contradicted yourself, Fugaku. You claim to trust the man and yet you don't trust him. Which is it? Fugaku was absolutely livid. He looked to Danzo for support but found none as the man was gazing intently ahead of himself. He gritted his teeth and bowed his head to the Hokage. I trust in the Yondaime, but my decision stands firm. I will not help this child further his development. You will receive no help from the Uchiha clan. As long as you don't hinder his growth, I will ask for none. Now, are there any other objections to my plan? Yes, even though it's troublesome. What of the boy's social development? If he is to be a Hokage, he will need to interact with and develop bonds with people his age and earn the trust of the villagers. Nara, I will not lie. The villagers will be a difficult task. However, I would ask all the clans that have agreed to help to allow the boy into your homes and not to ostracize him. Allow him to play and interact with your children and allow friendship to blossom. Let him learn what he can from you, see the different ways of families, allow him into your hearts. My daughter-in-law has already taken him in as hers. He chuckled before speaking again. I would suggest you not to make her angry by being mean to her child. You all know how mothers get when their children are wrongfully abused. The gathered council members chuckled at the weak joke and Sarutobi clapped his hands, signifying the end of that particular business. Now that that's taken care of, let's move on to other topics. Such as the rebuilding of certain quarters. Sarutobi arrived home late that night, completely tired out. The populace had been ecstatic that he'd been renamed Hokage, as he was a familiar face and they already knew how his rule would go. He was a kind, soft-spoken man and had an infinite well of patience. He smiled when he saw Eri trying to calm a frantic Naruto, shushing him and cradling him. Hello there, Eri. You seem to be quite distraught. What seems to be the problem? The girl looked up at him distressed. Oh, thank goodness you're home, father. I can't get Naruto to calm down. He just won't quit crying. What do I do? Let me have him. Have you checked his diaper? Yes, it's dry. Has he been fed? She gave him an exasperated look and sighed. The boy eats more than half this household. I bet he went through a whole gallon of milk today. Have you tried to lull him to sleep? Father, please. I've tried everything. Allow me to try this. Sarutobi sat in a chair, cradling the hysterical Naruto in his arms and formed a few hand signs as Eri watched. She sat enraptured as wind picked up and began to blow around the baby, caressing his cheeks and hair, and a small whistling tune played around his ear. She watched in awe as his crying stopped and his eyes began to droop. He kept opening and closing his mouth until Sarutobi took a pacifier and popped it into his mouth. He grew concerned when he heard a slight popping sound and pulled it out of the baby's mouth and eyed it carefully. Puncture marks. He looked over at Eri and smiled. I believe he's teething. That's the problem. You'll need to invest in something for him to chew on tomorrow. Her eyes widened and she lifted his lips back to expose the tips of two pointy white molars where his canines should be. But father, he shouldn't be teething this early. It isn't natural. No, it's not. But neither is it natural for a baby to hold the most powerful beast ever. I can only imagine what surprises he'll hold in store for us in the future. This is just one of them. Perhaps he will even manifest a bloodline not seen for centuries. A bloodline? Which one? Sarutobi turned his eyes to his daughter and smiled. One that is based entirely on stealth and is one of the greatest ever seen. I can only hope that the dormant genes required for it come forward in him. What did it do? Well, records are sketchy and I'll need to research to find out if it's even possible, but Minato's wife told me one time that her family had a most peculiar bloodline that went back to the beginning of the ninjas. Wait, Minato had a wife? And she was most beautiful. But that is for another time. I do remember the name of the bloodline, however. What is it? His eyes twinkled and he grinned at the baby sleeping in his arms. She called it the melt. Naruto grew quickly and happily in the Sarutobi household and the family was better off for it. His mother and father were devoted to raising him right. At age 1 he was toddling around the house, getting into all kinds of trouble. To Eri's distress, his appetite only grew with his age and there were several instances where she had to send a servant to the market while he was still being fed. The little boy's 2 teeth had come in fully at the age of 6 months and at first, everyone was alarmed that they were fangs. Yahiko had put it best by bluntly spurting out. He looks like a goddamned vampire. Sarutobi could only guess that it was part of the influence of having the Kyuubi sealed within him, a defense mechanism that, even while he was still technically defenseless, if someone stuck a finger near his mouth they'd be pulling back a punctured digit. The boy had quite the jaw power for a babe. Year 2 saw the bundle of perpetual energy running the entire Sarutobi compound ragged. If he didn't want to be caught, he wasn't going to be caught. He didn't sleep, he took power naps and then was back on his feet. By then he had gotten all of his teeth and was eating solids, creating an even larger food bill. Sarutobi was just glad that his family was provided for by the village. If they were to ever wonder why his food stipend was so large, they'd be outraged. The boy ate like a horse, and what pocket dimension he stored the food in was beyond the aging Hokage. In his 3rd year he had begun to meet the other children of the clans. As if by some miracle, or Kishimoto's plot-driven, backwards-assed, Uchiha-loving mind, all the clan heads had produced heirs at around the same time. Naruto's first stop with his parents and grandfather was the Hyuga household, where he met Neji and Hinata. Neji was a polite little boy, always smiling, even though he had received the curse seal. His cousin Hinata was a shy girl by nature and had hidden behind her father's legs when the Sarutobis walked in with Naruto. Her world had been filled with dreariness and brunettes, pale skin and impassive faces. An inquisitive, energetic blonde-haired boy with tan skin and whisker marks was a wonder of the world to her. Sarutobi had ushered him forward toward the little girl and smiled down. Go on, tell her your name. The blonde had smiled, showing off his fangs and making the little girl head in awe. It was like the sun had walked in. Naruto. Who you? She had looked down at the ground, finding her toes very interesting at the moment. Hinata. Neji had approached him as well, out of curiosity. Hizashi had tried to catch him, but he was already too far gone. Naruto saw the boy approaching and turned to him with a million-watt smile. Who you? I'm Neji. Naruto squinted his eyes and pointed at Neji's bandaged forehead. Boo boo. No. Naruto grinned again and latched onto Hinata's hand. Wanna pee way? Sarutobi chuckled as the three toddled outside, throwing a ball back and forth. Hizashi attempted to apologize for Neji's abruptness, but was stopped by Hiashi. Let them be children for a while, Hizashi. It won't be long until we won't be able to watch them play. To say Hizashi was stunned was an understatement. His brother was usually cold toward him and Neji. He'd expected worse. Sarutobi just smiled. Naruto had that effect on people. The other children were just as easy to get along with. Kiba was just as energetic as Naruto, and the golden-haired child loved going to the Inuzuka compound to play with the dogs. He'd vehemently decreed that he wanted a Ninken, but Sarutobi told him no. The boy had pouted for a solid week until his grandfather whacked him over the head with a rolled-up newspaper and told him to be a big boy. The Abarames were another interesting group to him. Shino didn't talk much, but Naruto did enough blabbering for both of them. The bug users were always happy to have him over, especially since he sometimes brought them bugs he'd found. The Ino-Shika Cho trio were usually found together at one house or another. They loved having Naruto around. He was naturally inquisitive, and Shikamaru found him a natural for board games, even if they were child games. Choji was ecstatic to find someone who ate as much as he did. Ino was happy to have another boy to boss around. She enjoyed being the queen bee. Naruto's fourth year found a few changes in his carefree life, however. Hizashi, a man he had come to like immensely, was gone not long after he had met him. He had sacrificed himself to save his village and family, and several changes had occurred in the Hyuga family as a result. Neji, for one, had become introverted and never wanted to play anymore. Hinata had become shyer because of the pressure put on her, but whenever Naruto was around, she would perk up. He was her best, and only, friend in the world, and he never ceased to cheer her up. His other friends didn't have as much time to play anymore either, as their parents began to inundate them into their clans, jutsus and training regimens. The last time he had seen them all was at a party to celebrate his grandfather's birthday. Imagine his surprise when, the day after his fourth birthday, his grandfather appeared before him, not with his usual kind smile, but that of a man on a mission. Come with me, Naruto. Your training for your future begins today. I've waited long enough. Naruto stood and followed his grandfather without question. Once they were on the grounds behind the house, he felt compelled to ask why they were out there. Sarutobi sighed heavily and knelt down to eye level. There are several truths that I will have to share with you at some point, Naruto, but I can't right now. You're simply too young for what I have to tell you. However, that does not mean I won't start preparing you for the task I have set for you. What am I going to be doing? I'm going to train you to be a Hokage, Naruto. I'm going to train you to take over my job when I'm done. Naruto's eyes went wide. He didn't know what all his grandfather did, but he was a widely loved and respected man. Everywhere they went, people bowed and spoke in reverent tones to the man. He couldn't do whatever the man did. He wasn't good enough. Sarutobi saw the doubt in the young boy's eyes and grabbed him by the shoulders. I know you're young, Naruto, and you want to play with your friends, but this is a task you were chosen for. There is no one else more qualified to lead this village after my time is up. I know you can do it, Naruto, and I'm going to help you. The little blonde gave his grandfather a solemn look of determination and grinned. Don't worry. I won't let you down. I'll do whatever you need me to do. Sarutobi smiled and stood back up. He had a rough time ahead of him. That's good to hear, Naruto. Now, tell me, what do you know about being a ninja? Naruto's eyes lit up. Ninjas are really cool. They can do all kinds of stuff and they're really strong. Ah, and who do you think is the strongest ninja in this village? Naruto put his finger to his chin and thought for a moment. I dunno. I really don't know. Sarutobi chuckled and patted the boy's head. I'm the strongest ninja in this village, Naruto. Naruto stared up at Sarutobi, completely baffled. But you can't be the strongest. Well, you know. Sarutobi held in his laughter, already knowing what was going to be said. I'm what? Naruto shrunk in on himself, trying to will himself smaller. Old. Yes, I'm old, but that doesn't make me any less strong. With age comes wisdom, and while I'm not as physically strong as I was when I was younger, I have years of experience and cunning to draw on. I'm strong because of my mind, not my body. Gigi, can you teach me to be strong? Hi, I can. And we'll start today. I want you to put on this suit and we'll get started. Naruto grunted as he shrugged on the bodysuit. It's heavy, Gigi. I know. That's a weighted bodysuit designed to improve your muscles. We'll work on your body during the day and your mind at night. Now hop to it and give me 10 laps around the yard. As Naruto struggled around, adjusting to his new weight, Sarutobi was having a mildly heated discussion with Eri. He's too young for this, father. He's only 4, he doesn't need to be learning everything you're going to teach him at this age. He needs to start now, Eri. The sooner I start, the sooner we can have a Hokage that can protect this village and put an end to all the petty and squabbling of the council and people. But he's so little. Look at him struggling. He's not ready. The old Hokage sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Eri, I love you like my daughter, but we've been through this several times since he turned 2. He needs to start now, while his mind is young and malleable. His face turned grim and Eri felt a little bit of fear. This was no longer her father-in-law, this was the professor. His life will not be an easy one. We've given him a home and love, yes, but outside these walls is an ugly, dirty, hate-filled world. I want him to be ready for that, especially when I turn the evidence of his birth over to the public. His mother and father had many enemies within the village as well as outside our walls. He has to be able to protect himself and strike down those who would do him or this village harm. His gaze softened a bit and his age began to show a little more. It wasn't supposed to be like this, you know. I'm not supposed to be Hokage, and he's not supposed to be an orphan. His father was supposed to be teaching him right now, in between running a village and dealing with the neighboring villages. He was supposed to learn about his family from his parents' mouths, not from a dusty scroll or a surrogate grandfather. But either way, he is destined for bigger things than you or I could imagine. And that starts today. He turned to see Naruto huffing and puffing on his last lap, and when the boy had finished, he called him over. Drop and give me 50 each of push-ups and sit-ups, then do 30 jumping jacks. After that, we'll begin the fun stuff. Remember to stretch out once you're finished. Naruto nodded his head tiredly and began his exercises. If this was part of his future job, he wasn't very enthusiastic so far. Sarutobi, meanwhile, had ducked back inside, leaving a cage Bunshin to keep watch. He stood in front of Yahiko and Eri, outlining his plan. Now look, I know you two aren't very overjoyed with what I'm doing, but you'll have to get past that. I need your help as we mold him into a Hokage. Eri, your job is to make sure he eats more healthy things. You can spoil him every now and then, but his diet is going to have to make a drastic change. Yahiko, I want you to teach him to read. Instill a love of literature into him. I want the two of you to also ensure that he keeps up with his friends. Yahiko scowled and put his arm around his wife's shoulders. She was beginning to show her pregnancy and he didn't want her working too hard. By instill, you mean force. I don't like this, Dad. It reminds me of the way the Uchiha raised Itachi. Sarutobi glared at his son and held his hands behind his back. The one shining difference between the way Itachi was raised and Naruto is being raised is that I don't see him as a stepping stone to further my own ambitions. This is the only thing he can do in life. Do you think any civilians would hire him to work for them? No, of course they wouldn't. So, he'll be a shinobi and I'm training him to be the best of the best. I'm not training him to be a normal ninja, I'm training him to be a Hokage. But what is the difference? Itachi was raised to be the ultimate Uchiha. The boy literally has no emotions. And Naruto does. I won't deprive him of his humanity, but I will not leave him to the wolves unprepared. Excuse me, my student is done with his exercises. Yahiko and Eri watched in silence as the older Sarutobi walked out. I still don't like this. It's wrong to decide a child's future for them. Yahiko sighed and pulled his wife in closer. He understood where his wife was coming from and he agreed, but Naruto's future was already chosen the day he was born. It is wrong. But the Yondaime sealed any of the boy's alternative paths by sealing the Kyuubi within him. This is the only path he can take and Dad is just making sure he can walk it with his head held high. The only thing we can do is help and make sure he retains his humanity. Eri rubbed the small bulge on her tummy and reached up to kiss her husband on the lips. As long as he never loses that brilliant smile of his, I'll be happy. Sarutobi came out to a wide-eyed Naruto standing quietly in the yard. Gigi, how did you do that? You turned into smoke and disappeared. Excellent, an inquisitive young mind. That is part of what I shall teach you in the years to come. That was a kage bunshin, a form of clone used for information gathering and fighting. It will be an important tool for learning later. Right now, you need the basics. We're going to learn how to mold chakra. What's chakra? Sarutobi smiled and put himself into professor mode. He loved to impart wisdom to the younger generation. Chakra is made by meshing together spiritual and physical energy. You just have to unlock it so we can begin to mold it into something else. How? Concentrate on a force inside you. A stream that seems to flow through you and try to guide that stream somewhere outside its natural flow. That should unlock it. He watched as Naruto sat down and began to concentrate. Sarutobi was practically giddy with excitement. Here he was, with another student, about to begin the lessons that would last a lifetime. He watched hopefully as Naruto's face scrunched in concentration and struggle. Slowly, but surely, the chakra began to trickle out. Sarutobi was happy for his student and was about to tell him to stop when he felt the flow of chakra increase and his eyes widened. Naruto, you can stop now. The boy apparently was in too much of a trance to hear him. His face was still screwed into that look of utter concentration. Sarutobi began to sweat when the blue chakra started to be easily seen. It shouldn't be possible for a child to produce that much. Naruto. Stop now. Naruto still didn't hear him and the chakra flow was so powerful now that it attracted the entirety of the Sarutobi household. Yahiko and Eri stood in wonder as the boy was bathed in the ethereal blue glow. Eri, who was a civilian, could even see it. Father, is he supposed to do that? No, he's not. Naruto, stop this at once. The small blonde was now shaking from the force of chakra being expelled, and Sarutobi did the only thing he could think of to stop it. He chopped Naruto on the back of the neck and watched with bated breath as the blue chakra receded. Well, at least he unlocked it. But what awesome power! Sarutobi turned to his family and servants and put on his most intimidating face. Whatever you just saw here, never leaves here, understood? Aoi, despite the fact he might get in trouble, decided to ask the unspoken question. Master, is it normal for a child to have such power? Sarutobi frowned and looked back to the conked-out child. No, it isn't. But then again, we all know he isn't normal by any conventional means. With chakra that powerful, and at such a young age, it'll probably take quite a while to train him to use it effectively. I hope not, but that is usually the case with those with power. Yahiko picked his son up off the ground and started back toward the house. I think that's enough physical training for today, Dad. I'll start him on some history and theory tonight. Sarutobi smiled and cracked his aching back. Yes, that might be an ideal thing for today. I have a few things to tend to at the tower. Tell Naruto we'll start again tomorrow. Naruto had not been happy with his schedule of learning. He remembered letting his chakra go and it flaring wildly out of control as he tried to rein it in. He remembered getting chopped in the neck, and he remembered getting fussed at by his mother once he awoke. He remembered reading about the history of Konoha and starting on a book of jutsu theory with his father, which he found utterly boring. His father had bopped him over the head with a book and told him that he needed to know this. When asked why, a contemplative look came over his face. Because knowledge is power, Naruto. Let's say you're fighting someone. You know what your opponent is capable of. He knows what you're capable of. But neither of you have any updated information on each other for the past 6 months. If he tries a move you've never met before, what will you do? Get away. Wrong. That's what normal people do. It might be a jutsu that spreads out as it goes, covering more area, but losing power. It might be a straightforward shot. You need to be able to analyze these things and choose your path accordingly. Then why am I reading this? Why can't I just train? This is training, son. You're training your mind to know what to do. The body can't react if the mind doesn't know what it's doing. Naruto nodded slowly, letting the information seep in. So if I read everything I can, I'll get really smart and be able to figure things out more quickly. In a nutshell, yes. It's more complicated than that, but that's the gist of it. Naruto silently picked up his book on history and started to read again. Yahiko had never been more proud of his son, but soon, he had to help him again. Hey Dad, what's a kawarimi? And so had began their nightly sessions. Currently, Naruto was lying in bed asleep. Not that he knew it, but his alarm clock said 4 o'clock and a sinister figure stood beside his bed. The figure lifted its hand, with possibly a weapon, and began to tilt it downward. And Naruto was introduced to the concept of a cold glass of water in the morning if he didn't wake up when he was supposed to. Sarutobi watched amused as his grandson spit and sputtered and thrashed around on the bed. Once he was finished, Sarutobi cleared his throat and threw the training suit at him. Get dressed and meet me downstairs. We're going on a run. Naruto grumbled as he made his way downstairs, the suit seeming to be heavier than it was yesterday. He looked around for his grandfather and found him outside, standing with his hands on his hips, twisting and bending in several directions. Naruto walked outside to find the old man in a black ninja outfit, totally contrasting his usual white robes. Ah, good morning. Awake now are we? Naruto mumbled under his breath and nodded. Good. Now we're going to run 1 lap around the village. Every 2 weeks we'll increase it by 1 lap, keeping with the same time limit. But Gigi, I can't run that fast. You don't have to run fast, You just have to complete the task. We'll worry about speed later. Right now, I want to condition your body so that you can complete whatever I give you to do. Now let's go. But Gigi. Sarutobi turned a stern eye to his grandson and Naruto cringed under the glare. During these times, I am your sensei Naruto and I expect you to show me the proper respect. You may not like me sometimes during our training, but you will respect me. I may love you like a grandson, but that does not mean I will tolerate insubordination from you. Naruto's eyes widened. What do you mean, like a grandson? Sarutobi cursed under his breath. That had been an unwanted slip of the tongue. He put on a smile and patted the boy's head, diffusing the situation. It was a slip of the tongue, Naruto. Now let's go. The boy nodded his head and they jogged off into the morning. Naruto lay on his back panting. His run had turned into quite a spectacle when they'd run afoul of a certain green-clad Chunin. Naruto had been fascinated with the man's eyebrows, but had remained quiet as Sarutobi and Guy spoke while running. Guy had been impressed that a 4-year-old was out on a run with the Hokage and had voiced his pleasure at having found one with great flames of youth. He had offered to help train Naruto whenever he could in taijutsu and Sarutobi readily accepted. He couldn't be around all the time. Naruto was happy when their run ended. He might be an endless bundle of energy but he was still a child and his muscles were not yet developed fully. Before he could enjoy the respite, Sarutobi called him over to begin his morning calisthenics. By the time they got around to jutsus, Naruto was nearly on empty, until Sarutobi told him they were going to be manipulating his chakra. Naruto had studied the previous night with his father on some of the things that one could do with chakra and right now he was like a kid with a new toy, which he essentially was. Sarutobi was quick to remind him of the seriousness of their training with a bop on the head. We're here to train your body, Naruto, not waste energy. If you have time and energy to jump around, then you have time to put more effort into learning. I'm sorry, Sensei. I'm just excited about some of the things I read I could do with chakra last night. Sarutobi smiled and put his hands behind his back. That's all well and good, Naruto, but I need to get you to the point where you can actually mold the chakra into a jutsu. You're still young and therefore your control won't be all that great, but that's where this comes in. He held up a leaf and Naruto's face scrunched in confusion. That's a leaf, Sensei. What does that have to do with anything? I want you to be able to hold this leaf to your forehead, using only chakra, before I'll teach you any kind of jutsu. Once you've mastered this exercise, we'll add more leaves to different parts of your body and let you climb trees. How long will this take? The old Hokage shrugged and grinned at his student. That all depends on your skill, determination, and mindset. If you set out to do something, do it. Don't half-ass it. Don't skip out on this training either. I won't teach you anything until you learn it. Now try to imagine your chakra as a suction cup to keep the leaf to your forehead. I have some things to take care of at the tower, but I'll be back soon to see how you're progressing. Naruto nodded and picked up the leaf, settling into a cross-legged stance against a tree. Sarutobi watched with pride as he put the leaf on his forehead, only to huff in agitation as it blew away. He turned in the doorway to find his son staring at him. Well, how's he coming along? He's impatient and brash, but then again, he's 4. I've never taught a student that young. He has promise though. He kept up with both me and Guy on our morning run with us at a quarter speed. Yahiko's eyes widened and he smiled. That's my boy. He'll do just fine. I'm going to make him start on the next chapter of Jutsu Theory tonight. That's good. I think we should designate a day or two where he can go and play with his friends though, especially Hinata. He brightens her and the rest of the Hyuga's day when he visits. That family needs a good dose of cheer. I agree. I'll arrange a play date later. Hinata will be ecstatic to see him. Indeed. Well, I must be off. Someone has to kill the paperwork after all. Keep an eye on Naruto for me. Make sure he's doing that exercise right. Yahiko nodded and went back inside the house. He found Eri sitting in a chair, lightly rubbing the small bulge in her stomach. Are you still fretting over the baby? Don't worry about it. How can I not worry about it? Naruto is still a handful, and to have another child running around. Yahiko sighed as he sat on the arm of the chair and kissed her on the forehead. You have to remember that not all children are like Naruto. This one will be a cakewalk compared to him when he was a baby. It won't eat as much, hopefully. Sarutobi sighed as he walked back through the gates of his home. He had taken longer than he thought and had missed the rest of Naruto's training. He regretted that, but knew the boy would understand. He was thoroughly surprised to find that Naruto didn't greet him at the door. He searched for a while before finding the boy reading the Jutsu Theory book with Yahiko, a leaf stuck to his forehead. He smiled proudly. Things would go more smoothly from here. Naruto panted as he rose from the ground. He'd been thrown there quite harshly by his sensei and it had hurt, a lot. This particular taijutsu style was hard to learn and required concentration from him on several levels. Sarutobi insisted on teaching him Shaolin monkey style since it was a fast-paced, acrobatic style that promoted counters and quick strikes. He grunted as he stood upright and settled into the crouching stance again. Good. That was very good, but you need to be more flexible and not rush headlong into things. Again. Naruto grimaced and analyzed what he saw before him. After almost a month, he was making considerable progress. He had the leaf exercise down to a fine art and constantly had a leaf affixed to his forehead, even as he sparred. The only time it fell was when he was unconscious. He'd begun to work leaves onto other parts of his body while he read with his father. His chakra control was excellent considering he started with nothing. He rushed forward, low to the ground, and swept at his sensei's legs. Sarutobi picked his left leg up and sent it crashing back toward the ground. Naruto used the momentum he'd built up on the sweep to jerk himself into a handstand and lash out with a kick aimed at his mentor's chest. Sarutobi grabbed his foot and flung him toward a tree. Naruto caught himself at the last second by latching onto a branch and swinging up and over it, only to stop in a squatting position. Sarutobi wiped his brow and watched his student with interest. Naruto had come quite a ways in just a month. For a 4-year-old he was quite the astute learner and grasped things easily if given an example. Written word was even easier for him, as he could conceptualize what he had to do and figured it out for himself, usually bending it to accommodate certain aspects he found either uncomfortable or impossible. That's enough for today, Naruto. It's almost time for you to go visit Hinata anyway. I have to go to the tower and fight a losing battle against paperwork. Be sure to get home in time for your evening lessons. Naruto swung down from the branch and landed in a crouch. He stood upright and bowed toward his grandfather. Of course, sensei. I'll do as you say. Sarutobi smiled and waved him away. That signaled the end of their student-teacher role for the day and both were glad for it. Good. Now go have fun with Hinata and don't get into too much trouble. Alright, Gigi. See you later. Sarutobi grinned as the blonde made his way inside to take a bath before going to the Hyuga household. He and Eri had begun to beat manners into the boy's head along with his training, and he was pleasantly surprised to see that Naruto was well behaved, when he wanted to be. The boy was a natural-born actor. If he didn't want to be seen as a child, he could imitate his grandfather to a T. Just like his birth father. Sarutobi shook the thought from his mind and went inside to change into his Hokage robes. He hated having to cut the boy's training short, especially since his stamina increased by the day. Perhaps it was time to have Guy intervene. Taijutsu was Guy's speciality and he could always keep Naruto's genjutsu and ninjutsu to himself. They'd have to find the boy a weapon soon too. He himself was more situated to Bojutsu, and perhaps he'd introduce him to Enma. See what the old monkey thought about a possible new summoner. But that was all for later. Right now he had to prepare himself to stamp his name over and over and over, and over. Naruto hummed happily as his mother escorted him to the Hyuga household. He loved to visit Hinata. She always made him feel wanted. It was the walkover that unnerved him. Whereas the clans welcomed him with open arms, the civilians sneered and made rude gestures toward him. Eri scowled at those who did so and they quickly turned away. She hated that they treated her son like this. They still held the Sarutobis in high regard, but Naruto was treated as a pariah, and one day they'd have to explain why. She dreaded that day. Naruto just thought that they didn't like him because he was treated well. Perhaps they didn't like that he was being trained by the Hokage. Maybe they thought it was favoritism above their own children. He just couldn't figure it out. He'd asked one of them before what he did to make them angry and the woman had gave him a look that, had daggers come out of her eyes, would have killed him. You know what you did. And they treat you like a king for it. He didn't know what she meant by that. He'd asked his grandfather what she meant and the old man's face drooped and he clapped a hand on Naruto's shoulder. One day soon, I'll tell you the story. But until then, trust in me that all will be well. And he did. He did trust his grandfather, but the looks were becoming more and more baleful and hateful, searing into his memory. He was always happy when they arrived at one of his friends' houses. He couldn't wait to see Hinata again. Hinata was in her own little world. Her mother was pregnant with her what she hoped was a little sister and she was currently rubbing her tummy, trying to get the baby to kick. Her mother chuckled and pushed her tiny hand away. Hinata, the baby won't kick if you poke at it. Besides, it hasn't grown enough to do that yet. But, I wanted to play with my baby sister. And how do you know it's a little girl? Because you can choose the baby you want. Right. Himiko's laughter rang out through the room, sounding like 100 merry bells. She truly loved her innocent little daughter. That's not entirely the way it works, Hinata. Suddenly they heard the sound of pounding feet and the door slid open to reveal a burst of sun-dropped hair. Hinata-chan. She barely had time to turn around before she was tackled by her best friend. Eri sighed from the doorway and picked him off the poor dazed little girl by the scruff of his neck. What have I told you about attacking Hinata like that? Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly and looked down. Sorry. It's just I haven't seen her in over a week. I was just excited. It's okay, Eri-san, he didn't hurt me. Hinata's soft voice came from the floor as she picked herself up. Naruto turned to her and flashed a megawatt grin. Wanna go annoy Neji? He's such a stick in the mud nowadays. I don't think we should bother him, Naruto-kun. He's not nice to be around now. Naruto sighed in defeat and immediately put his smile back on. Wanna go see what Kiba's doing? Hinata turned to her mother and found her smiling. Go on, you two, have fun. Just take a guard with you. Naruto grabbed Hinata's hand and ran out of the room, dragging the helpless little girl behind him, while shouting, "Thank you," over his shoulder. Eri sighed heavily and took the cup of tea offered her from Himiko. Thank you. He is such a handful sometimes. Yes, but he brightens Hinata's day so much. Hiyashi's too, even though he won't admit it. She needs to be around people like him. Our clan is too rigid and stoic. Neji isn't a good influence on her either. Has he gotten any better? Himiko sighed and rubbed her stomach absently. No, he hasn't. He's become even more withdrawn and sometimes I see him staring at Hinata with disdain. I just hope he doesn't become bitter toward her. Eri nodded and took another sip of tea. So do I, because Naruto wouldn't stand for it. He's quite protective of her. Yes, he's like the big brother that Neji should be. If only our clan did things differently. The unspoken words hung in the air. Then everything would be better. Naruto raced through the streets of Konoha, a puffing Hyuga behind him, carrying Hinata. The poor little girl just couldn't keep up with her more energetic friend. He stopped outside the gates of the Inuzuka compound and turned around to see a scowling, red-faced, branch house Hyuga. Naruto-sama, I would like to request once again, that you don't run off and leave Hinata-sama like that. It's very rude. Naruto grinned sheepishly and bowed. I'm sorry Hyuga-san. I'll try to be more careful next time. The Hyuga mumbled something under his breath that sounded like, I'll bet, and sat the Hyuga heiress down. Hinata tottered for a moment and then stood upright. She huffed indignantly and walked up to Naruto. She might be shy around people she didn't know and was quiet and gentle by nature, but Naruto's influence rubbed off on her after prolonged exposure. You left me again. I'm sorry. Hinata sighed and bowed her head. She just couldn't stay angry with him for more than 2 seconds. He was too kind-hearted and apologetic. Just don't do it again please. Naruto stood upright and grabbed her hand. Okay. Let's find Kiba. The two children walked through the grounds with their escort quietly, searching for their missing friend. Several dogs walked up to them, but when they smelled who it was they simply wagged their tails and left. Naruto was on good terms with most of the dogs in the kennel. And what have we here? The gruff voice came from behind them and Naruto immediately recognized it as the voice of one Kuromaru, the only dog that was indifferent to him at best. The dog seemed to keep shut of him if it could, but today he had come forward. Naruto squeezed Hinata's hand and she squeezed back for reassurance. She smiled slightly since it was very rare for her to reassure him. Kuromaru made his way in front of them and sat on his haunches. What are you two doing here? What is your business? Naruto put on his best possible impassive face he was learning from his grandfather and spoke softly. We're looking for Kiba. Have you seen him? He's busy. Go home. Well, if we could just talk to him for a second. Leave. Hinata saw that the dog's eyes were hardening slowly and that Naruto wasn't having any luck. Time to call in her trump card, her inability for anyone to truly hate her. Kuromaru-san, if we could just speak to him for a second. The one-eyed dog turned its gaze to her and she shivered. The thing was more like a wolf than a dog. I said he's. Kuromaru, what are you doing? Hello Naruto, Hinata. The two bowed as one and spoke together. Hello, Sume-sama. Sume eyeballed the two and her companion. She'd overheard everything, but wasn't about to give it away. She wanted answers for her companion's abruptness. How can I help you two youngsters today? Can Kiba play today? Sume smiled at them and pointed in the direction of the kennel. He can now. He's being punished for messing up one of his sister's things, but I'll let him go for now. He can finish cleaning out the pens later. Sume smiled as the two ran off to the kennels and turned to Kuromaru with a hard eye. What was that all about? The dog had the decency to look ashamed. Forgive me, Sume, but I can't help myself sometimes. He reeks of fox all the time. Sume sighed and rubbed the bridge of her nose. You know he's not the fox, Kuromaru. Don't be that way toward him. One day he'll be strong enough to call you on your behavior, and where will you be then? Where will those ignorant villagers be then? She left the dog to ponder that as she went back inside. Naruto and Hinata tried to sneak up on their friend, but, as always, he smelled them coming. You two really shouldn't try to sneak up on me. I'll always smell you. Hinata giggled as she watched Naruto sulk. He really was too funny when he was around Kiba. One day, I'll find a way to mask my scent and then you'll be sorry. Kiba turned around and grinned at his friends. I doubt it. You smell like a fox. It's pretty hard not to find you. Naruto put a finger to his chin and thought. I wonder why I smell like a fox. Mom got me a stuffed fox for a present one time and I sleep with it. I don't think that's why you smell like a fox, Naruto-kun. Kiba grinned at Hinata and threw an arm around her neck. No one can explain why he smells like that. I asked Mom about it and she just told me that people smell differently. He took an experimental whiff of Hinata and she blushed. You smell like flowers, and cinnamon rolls. Hinata pushed him away and hid behind Naruto. I do not smell. Naruto frowned at Kiba and turned away. We were gonna ask you to play and help you get out of trouble, but since you hurt Hinata's feelings. Kiba immediately went on the defensive. But, Hinata, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. Please forgive me. You smell really nice. Hinata smiled and turned around. Being around Naruto also gave her the courage to be playful. But you were being a meanie. The Hyuga watching sighed and looked up at the sky. It should be another 15 minutes before they left for the park. The kids always did this. When the three arrived at the park, they found the other children there as well. Shikamaru and Choji were lounging on the grass, watching the clouds and sharing a bag of chips. Shino was watching a mound of ants intently, and Ino was playing with a pink-haired girl. Shikamaru and Choji waved at the three and Kiba bounded over to them. Hinata turned loose of Naruto's hand and padded over to say hello to Shino. Naruto watched them go and turned his attention to Ino and the girl she was playing with. He watched with careful eyes as the civilian parents gathered up their children and began to leave, but shook it off. He strode towards Ino, flashing a brilliant grin. Hey Ino-chan. Whatcha doing? Ino smiled up at her friend and turned back to Sakura. I'm playing with Sakura. I met her a while ago and we're friends now. Sakura. This is Uzumaki Naruto. My mommy said he's a bad person. Ino frowned at her new friend and looked back at Naruto. Well, I don't think he's bad. He's a little loud, but he's not mean. Sakura glanced over to where her mother was sitting and noticed the subtle motion for her to come. She stood and said goodbye to Ino before running off. Ino turned to Naruto and frowned at him. Now what did you do to her, Naruto? His eyes widened and he put up his hands in defense. I didn't do anything, Ino-chan. I just met her today. I don't know her. Ino glared at him and stood up, huffing. She walked away toward her mother. I bet you did something mean, Naruto. You ran off one of my new friends and I'm not talking to you. Naruto watched her go with tears in his eyes. He didn't like it when people were mad at him for no reason. He lowered his head and sniffled, trying to keep the tears from falling. But I didn't do anything. Hinata watched Ino leave and comforted Naruto by sitting on the swings with him until they left to take Kiba back home. Her day with Naruto was ruined and she felt bad that Ino had been mean to him. Kiba didn't know what to do once they dropped him off, so he just mumbled a goodbye and walked inside. The Hyuga knew that he had to take Naruto home now, and as they walked, he reflected on what he had seen. It happened every time the boy tried to make new friends, and now it appeared that he had lost one. Being every bit as sheltered as Hinata, Naruto had very few chances to interact with children his age, and he treasured the friends he had. Losing Ino would be a big blow. Hinata stood silently with her head bowed as they stood before the gates of the Sarutobi compound. Naruto looked up to see his best friend's downtrodden gaze and silently berated himself for bringing her day down. He put on a big grin and gave her a hug. It's not your fault, Hinata-chan. I know what you're thinking. Don't be like that. Ino-chan is just being a dummy head. I'll see you next time, okay? Hinata gazed up into his eyes and gave him a small smile. She was glad he was strong for both of them. His strength was beginning to rub off on her. I'm sorry about Ino-chan, Naruto-kun. She shouldn't have said such mean things. It's okay. I'm fine. Don't be sad, Hinata-chan. Smile for me. She gave him a big smile and he grinned as he gave her another hug. With a wave he was gone inside the compound and she and the Hyuga guard began the trek home. Hinata gave another glance back and smiled. Naruto-kun will be fine. The Hyuga guard smiled when he saw her perk up and walk a little straighter. He chuckled in his mind. Kids. Naruto frowned as he walked inside the house. Those words from Ino still hurt and he still didn't know what he had done. He nearly ran into his father as he rounded a corner. Hello son. How was your day? Bad. Why bad? Naruto looked up at his father with the beginnings of tears in his eyes and Yahiko mentally sighed. What happened now? I don't think Ino-chan likes me anymore. Yahiko scooped his son up and walked toward the study that they used for their nightly lessons. Eri was sitting in an armchair with her feet up, sipping a glass of mint tea. She liked to listen to them as they studied. Plus, she learned things too. Her gaze hardened when she saw Naruto's semi-wet cheeks and she raised an eyebrow at Yahiko. Tell your mother what you told me, son. Naruto sniffled and buried his face in his mother's dress. She rubbed the top of his head affectionately and spoke to him softly. Well, sweetie, what's wrong? I don't think Ino-chan likes me anymore. We went to the park and she was talking to a girl named Sakura and she said I was a bad boy and now Ino-chan says I'm mean and ran her friend off. Eri let the information sink in and sighed. Apparently, this Sakura girl was from a civilian family, since the only children Naruto had regular contact with were clan children. The only clan children he didn't play with were the Uchihas and she was happy for that. Sasuke was a pleasant child when you first met him, but he idolized his cold, emotionless brother and was sure to turn out like him. Not a choice playmate for either of her children, born or unborn. Honey, Ino-chan is just a little girl and she doesn't know what she's talking about. This Sakura girl doesn't know you and she doesn't know what she's saying either. Everything will be fine. Naruto sniffled and nodded his head, turning to face his father when he heard a book hit the table. Yahiko grinned and patted the chair beside him. Come on boy, we're studying the theory behind henge tonight. And you'll be keeping leaves on your forehead and elbows as we read. Naruto groaned as he sat in the chair. He loved spending time reading but theory was so boring. He'd much rather learn the jutsu than read about it. But he'd promised his grandfather he'd learn from him and resigned himself to that fate. He just didn't break promises if he could help it. He started on the page assigned him. Henge is the ability to change the appearance of a person into something else entirely. The size and shape can be anything, but there are several theories that weight can also be distributed or even negated. What's distributed? That means it can be put elsewhere to even it out. Oh, okay. What's negated? That means it's cancelled out. Oh, what's? That means it's not there. Oh, okay. Eri giggled into her teacup and Yahiko glared at her. It was his responsibility to teach the boy, not hers. He wanted him taught right. He grinned mischievously and paid attention to Naruto. Hey dad, what's size manipulation? Yahiko smirked and cut his eyes to Eri. Something pregnant women wished they had control over. A growl was his answer. What was that, dear? So totally worth it. The next day found Naruto out on his run with Sarutobi again, but this time the green spandex ninja was nowhere in sight. He sighed in contentment, until Sarutobi cleared his throat, a sign he was about to talk. Yes sensei. Naruto, from here on out, Guy will be your taijutsu instructor. I'll teach you jutsus when you master the next level of chakra manipulation, but I have to start attending to other duties as Hokage. But sensei. No buts, Naruto. I don't like it any more than you do, but Guy is an excellent teacher and you'll go far under his wing. He'll have you breaking bones in no time. I hope he means other people's bones. As they came back to the house, Sarutobi took on a serious demeanor when he saw Guy doing vertical push-ups, his loud boisterous voice carrying the number he was on over the grounds. The old Hokage knelt beside Naruto and looked him dead in the eye, as serious as could be. Naruto, I'm deadly serious here. Guy is a wonderful teacher, but if I ever catch you wearing a spandex bodysuit, I'll disown you. Am I clear? Naruto gulped and nodded. He didn't know what disown meant, but he didn't like the sound of it. He'd ask his father what it meant later. Sarutobi smiled and patted him on the head. Good boy. Now, I'll be helping you with some advanced chakra manipulation soon, but for now, listen to Guy. He'll help you when he's not on missions. When he is, he'll give you a detailed guideline to follow, and I expect you to treat him with the utmost respect. To you, he is Guy Sensei, understood? Hi, Sensei. Excellent. Good morning, Guy. Guy leapt to his feet and the morning sun pinged off his pearly whites. Hokage-sama. A most splendid morning it is. And how is my new pupil on this most youthful of mornings? Naruto never got to answer, since they heard a window slide open and a coffee mug came hurtling out. Guy never saw it coming. It collided with his head and he hit the ground like a sack of potatoes. Eri leaned out the window looking bleary-eyed, and both Naruto and Sarutobi cringed at her voice's volume. The woman, while a civilian, had aim that would make Mitarashi Anko jealous. Maida Guy. There are people trying to sleep. Keep your damn voice down. The window slammed shut and Guy leapt to his feet as if nothing ever happened. His voice was considerably lower though. Ah, I forgot Eri-san was sleeping. Pregnant women need all the sleep they can get, you see Naruto-kun. It helps the babies grow up strong and healthy. I've also heard, however, that walking in the morning before sunup can help them as well. Perhaps we should invite your mother to join us on one of our runs. Yo. Before he could get going, Sarutobi clapped a hand over his mouth and put a finger to his lips. Now Guy, I know how excited you are to have a new student, but you must be quiet here. Eri needs her sleep, so keep it under 100 decibels, all right? The eccentric Chunin nodded and Sarutobi sighed before standing back and addressing the newest master and student. Well, I'll leave you two to it. Naruto, make me proud. Guy, keep it down or your flames of youth will suffer. Yosh. I shall. And if I can't. A swift side kick from Naruto to his shin quieted him and Guy looked apologetically sheepish. Sarutobi smiled as he shunshined to his office. Those two will work out fine. Guy turned to his student with a twinkle in his eyes. He hadn't had a pupil in quite a while and wanted to enjoy the experience, at least until he took a team. Tell me, Naruto-kun, have you ever enjoyed the wonders of spandex? Naruto just sweat dropped. This was going to be a long day. Eri sipped her morning coffee as she sat on the porch watching her son and Guy spar. She had to admit, the man knew his stuff. Once he entered into his teacher mode, he was serious to a point of being scary. His eye was overly critical and he tore the boy's taijutsu apart. No, Naruto-kun. Extend the leg just a bit more to distribute the weight. Your elbow more. Don't bend that knee. Let the body flow. You're too stiff. She giggled when she saw the sour look on Naruto's face. He was trying hard, but even Sarutobi was not this hard a taskmaster when it came to the martial arts. Guy thought nothing of shoving the boy's body this way or that to straighten him up, but even she could see his expertise shining through. Already, Naruto's body was remembering the stances and katas. Suddenly Guy appeared beside her. She blinked and looked back out to the yard. Of course. Kage Bunshin. Eri-san, I hope I did not disturb you on this most youthful morning earlier. I was merely excited about my new pupil. Eri smiled up warmly at him and shook her head. No, I'm sorry Guy. I'm a little more cranky than normal in the mornings nowadays. I hope father forgives me for breaking his favorite coffee cup on your head. Guy's laughter rang out over the grounds and she cringed. He was a nice man, but she was getting to her limit. Not that I mind talking to you, sensei, but why are you over here? Guy quit laughing and his face dropped to impassiveness. I just want you to know that I am utterly overjoyed that I can help teach your son, but I have to know, how is it that he is still standing after his workout this morning? Eri her head and looked at him quizzically. Whatever do you mean? Eri-san, he is just a 4-year-old boy. I know he is a ninja in training, but even so, his muscles have begun to develop faster than any other child's and his mind is further cultivated. He is developing faster than other 4-year-olds and that worries me. I know. It worries me too. But father insists that he needs this. You know of his burden, Guy, you know of what it entails. The villagers shun and hate him, and he doesn't know why. We haven't told him yet. We think that his tenant is helping develop his body, while we cultivate his mind. Did you know he had fully developed sharp canines at the age of 6 months? I did not know that. But it doesn't matter. The boy's stamina is otherworldly. No other student has kept up with my regimen as well as he has. I can only hope that my next Genin team has half of his youthful vigor. Excuse me, I have to go. With a poof, the guy beside her disappeared and the guy in the yard stiffened for a moment and nodded in her direction before going back to the task of correcting what Naruto was doing wrong. Naruto stood with his hands on his knees, after a grueling lesson on Goken-style taijutsu. He liked it better than the monkey style, it was more rigid and allowed for more advancement than waiting, but Guy-sensei hit hard. And he was much more critical than his grandfather. The man was critical of how he stood or held his hands or looked at him sideways than Sarutobi could ever be. But that was why Guy was a taijutsu master and Sarutobi was the professor. Sarutobi had forgotten more than they'd ever learn, Guy had beaten the memories into his body so he wouldn't have to remember. All right Naruto, let's call it a day. You've done very well on this youthful morning. Now come over here and we'll outline your training schedule. Naruto beamed at the praise and immediately bounded over to his sensei. He didn't notice Guy's wide eyes as he flopped down cross-legged before the man. His stamina, it's like he never did anything today. I'm very impressed Naruto. You learn quickly and you don't object too much to what your sensei tells you. That is most admirable in a student. But that attitude should only apply to learning jutsus and the martial arts. Never let your true self be swayed by someone else's ideals. What do you mean, sensei? Don't let anyone tell you something that you don't believe in. Don't allow others to mold your mind for their benefit. You'll find in this world there are those who will hate you for no reason other than you're alive. You must be able to rise above them and be the bigger man. Let your senseis mold your body. Use your mind to decide what is right and what is wrong. Naruto nodded slowly. He didn't understand everything that his sensei was telling him, but his father could explain it in detail. Naruto stood and bowed to Guy. Thank you for your help, sensei. Guy smiled and handed Naruto a tiny scroll. He flipped it open to reveal his training schedule. Of course we'll have to get some better weights for that suit you're wearing, but that can come later. Our lives will be very busy from here on out Naruto-kun, but you and I are going to face this together. I've never trained a future Hokage before, so this is quite an honor. Naruto looked toward the ground and his hair overshadowed his eyes. Guy-sensei, what do you think of me taking the title Hokage? I've read about what it is, but I don't know if I'm the best one for the job. I mean, I'm not strong or smart. Guy knelt down and put his large hands on the boy's small shoulders. He looked him right in the eye and smiled. You're not strong right now, Naruto, but you will be. And you are very bright for your age. You'll make a splendid Hokage one day, and I'll be happy to serve under you. My only request when you reach the office is that you never let your flames of youth die." Naruto smiled at his teacher, and Guy was pleasantly surprised to see the sun gleam off his fangs. "Don't worry, sensei. My, flames of youth will never die. Yosh. And if they ever do, I will carry a boulder between my toes from here to Suna, until your flames return." Guy. "Ah yes. Sorry, Eri-san. Well, I must be going, Naruto. Continue your studies in the evenings and make your mind as strong as your body. And don't forget about your friends. Even a Hokage needs friends. It is lonely at the top." Naruto watched as Guy shunshined away and snatched up one of the leaves from the small whirlwind. "I have to learn how to do that one day." Sarutobi sighed happily as he entered his house and hung his robes and hat on the hook by the door. It was always pleasantly quiet now that Naruto had begun his studies and he had time for a decent smoke. He'd watched the new student and teacher through his crystal ball and was surprised to see that Naruto was coming along quickly in Goken, a greater surprise that he wasn't affronted by Guy's personal style or speeches. He'd chosen wisely for taijutsu, but nin and genjutsu were up to him. As he walked by the window, he noticed that Naruto had a leaf on his forehead and one on each elbow and kneecap. Sarutobi smiled and stopped by the window looking in. While the leaf exercise was not an overly difficult one, especially compared to tree climbing or water walking, it was essential for the young ones to know. He'd begin the boy on tree climbing in another month or so. Naruto saw his grandfather at the window and waved to him. Yahiko looked up and gave his father a broad smile. That is, until Naruto asked him another question. "Hey Dad, what's disowned mean?" "Why? Who told you that word?" Gigi said he'd disown me if he caught me wearing spandex. Yahiko growled and looked toward the window where the old man had miraculously disappeared. He turned to his son and smiled. "Remember some of those words I said I'd tell you about when you're older?" "Yeah, add this to that list. Now you keep reading, I'm going to go find your grandfather and have a talk with him." Naruto nodded and turned back to his book. This Cage Bunshin sounded pretty cool. He wondered why it didn't have any more information on it though. It was now into Naruto's 5th year and he had grown much. He was a bright and sunny child, always in the middle of things when he wasn't training with his senseis. Sarutobi had taught him henge and kawarimi and he was using them effectively to mimic passerby and swap with random items. Sarutobi insisted he be grounded in the basics before he was taught the more advanced things. And because he was starting so early, there was more than enough time. Guy had given up on the weights after a month. Sarutobi had been puzzled when the green-clad man presented him with Naruto's bodysuit and said it wasn't working. "Hokage-sama, I can't train Naruto with weights anymore. They simply aren't helping." Sarutobi gave Guy a hard look and took a drag on his pipe. "Explain." Guy nodded his head and sat the folded bodysuit on the desk. "His body is adapting to the weights, Hokage-sama. His body is doing things that normal bodies just don't do and the weights are not helping, they are hindering his progress." Sarutobi frowned and shook his head. "I don't understand what you're telling me, Guy. Hokage-sama, as I'm sure you're aware, the human body's muscles break down and rebuild when they are stressed with weights and weight training. The same is said for gravity seals since stress is being put on the body. Yes. Naruto's body is not breaking down, Hokage-sama, it is adjusting to the weight. His muscles don't break down and reform, they merely adjust so the weight isn't a burden and he doesn't notice them anymore. His body moves as if they weren't there." Sarutobi drew on his pipe and closed his eyes. "I suppose you've experimented with this." "Of course, Hokage-sama. I raise the weights by 5 pounds each day and by noon, he had adjusted so that they didn't bother him. He never fatigued, he just adjusted. That's the best word I can come up with. He adapted. I'll allow you to take the weights away and we'll see what happens from there. These developments are somewhat troubling and yet, they are most fortuitous. My grandson will be a very powerful warrior when he grows up. Guy smiled and bowed. And I couldn't be prouder to know I have a hand in that. Currently Naruto was working on the Bunshin, but he just couldn't get it right. He had expressed his doubts to Sarutobi about his ability to perform the jutsu and had been told to keep at it until he got it. But 5 months and no better results. That was pushing it. Naruto grit his teeth and tried again. His control was what Sarutobi called adequate, and he knew he should be able to do it, but it was like he had a mental block. Most of his friends were practicing in the basics of their family's jutsus, but Naruto's family, having no specific jutsus or Kekkei Genkei, was stuck with working from the ground up. He liked henge and used it often. But his version was a little different. Naruto had finally gotten the henge down to a more than acceptable level and could change into anyone or anything he imagined. Sarutobi noticed that the boy was quite skilled with it and not only changed his shape but weight as well. In fact, he completely baffled his senseis. Sarutobi had called Guy in to be his witness to the wonder that Naruto had created and they both watched as he performed his henge into Guy. Guy nodded his head in approval. Same height, same build, same facial features. He was about to ask what the problem was when Sarutobi changed into Guy and beckoned him over. Tell me Guy, what are the basics of henge taught in the academy? Well, the basics are that it allows you to transform into anything or anyone within reason. The body cannot be that much bigger than yours and the weight cannot be changed, but it is basically an illusion that is easily broken. Very good. Now, if one were to pump more chakra than necessary into the jutsu, what would happen? I don't know. Touch my shoulder. Guy touched Sarutobi's shoulder and saw the illusion waver slightly, as most illusions are wont to do when disturbed. Sarutobi released the technique and pointed at their young charge. Now touch Naruto's shoulder. Guy walked over and poked Naruto in the shoulder and his eyes widened when he realized that the illusion did not waver in the slightest. In fact, the illusion felt solid. That wasn't right. Henge was a low-level technique that required great mental effort to keep up constantly and it wasn't a solid technique. True, the older you get the better with the technique and there were even variations used that multiplied kunai and shuriken by hardening chakra to resemble the objects, but that's all they were, chakra. This shouldn't be possible on a child's level. Naruto whipped his head back and forth, trying to decipher what made the two so odd. Sarutobi merely smiled at the boy and patted him on the head. Don't worry about it. We'll tell you what I wanted to show Guy later. Of course, later, more often than not, never came and Naruto was always left with questions. He rarely ever got answers to any important ones, only receiving the vague answer, "We'll tell you when you're older." As he walked up and down the tree, leaves stuck to various points of his body, he thought about his friends. Ino still hadn't talked to him since that day and the little blonde went out of her way to ignore him if possible. It hurt to lose a friend, but Naruto learned a valuable lesson out of that. When someone wants nothing to do with you, cherish what you have and move on. Hinata's baby sister, Hanabi, had been born and their family was doing fine so far. Hinata's mother had contracted an illness though, and was constantly bedridden, leaving the little girl without her merry voice or kind words. She'd also been taken by Hiashi to begin the learning points of Jiyuken. The straightforward taijutsu style was an affront to Hinata's gentle nature, but she was trying her hardest not to disappoint. Kiba was spending more and more time becoming acquainted with Ninkins in hopes that he would receive his soon. His mother insisted he still had a few more years, but he held out hope. Shino had begun to cultivate his colony and communicate with them and had become even more withdrawn. If Naruto wanted to see his silent friend, he had to make an effort to go to the Aburame district himself. And he didn't get to go often because he was busy himself. Shikamaru and Choji were both as lazy as ever, their fathers not seeing the need to begin training them yet, insisting that kids could be kids for a little while longer. He didn't know how Ino was doing, but he hoped she was doing all right. Naruto sighed as he sat at the bottom of the tree. Guy had insisted he begin to meditate and he found it boring. He was way too active a person to sit and hum for hours on end, but he had been told to do what his sensei said and he did, or pretended to. Naruto's only true concerns at the moment were his taijutsu and his bunshin. He was okay with monkey style and average with Goken, but even Guy acknowledged they weren't fit for him. He couldn't bend enough with monkey style and he wasn't fit for Goken and it's hard as rock punches. Guy had sworn to scour every library he could to find an appropriate style, but it was taking too long for Naruto's taste. He huffed as he stood and walked inside to get lunch. Today, Guy was on a mission and his grandfather was stamping papers and more than likely going stir-crazy. Perhaps he'd visit and break the monotony. Naruto said hello to his mother, who was busy feeding his new little brother, Konohamaru, way too long a name in his opinion, but they'd asked his grandfather to name the kid. Eri smiled as she watched him bug the cook for ramen and get bopped on the head with a wooden spoon. The old woman said he'd be getting a healthy lunch and not that slop he ate at Ichiraku's with his grandfather. Naruto pouted and sat on a stool at the table, his feet swinging off the side. So what are you going to do after lunch, Naruto? He looked at his mom and put a finger to his chin, a habit he had picked up from somewhere. I don't know. I was thinking of going to see Gigi and bug him for some help on the bunshin. I can't get it right no matter how much I try. I know I'm pouring too much chakra into it, but no matter how much I try, I can't get the right amount. It just takes so little. Eri sighed and readjusted Konohamaru to her other arm. Naruto, most ninja don't use the bunshin once they're out of the academy unless it's to set up a trap. It's a very basic form of genjutsu that is almost worthless to a high-level ninja. It's only taught at the academy to show the students the basics of more advanced techniques. Naruto stared at his mom open-mouthed and gawked. Mom, I thought you weren't a ninja. How do you know all that? Eri rolled her eyes and laughed. Sweetie, I'm married to a ninja and I married into a ninja family. They talk about jutsus like normal families talk about sports. It's impossible not to pick up on some things. Naruto had taken on an introspective look and the gaze in his eyes somewhat worried Eri. So, there are more powerful versions of the bunshin. There are more powerful versions of everything, honey. I'm not helping you though, you should ask your grandfather or Guy-sensei. Naruto nodded and ate his lunch slowly, thinking it over. He remembered reading about what was it, Cage Bunshin? Yes, Cage Bunshin. But adequate information on it had been conveniently deleted from the scroll he had been reading. He was fairly certain it was a powerful technique and he had his reasons for learning it. He'd studied theory with his father every night since he learned to read until he was sick of the word, theory. But, he had to admit, learning it was a help. He knew that the more chakra a jutsu took, the less control it demanded. Anyone could use a high-level jutsu if they pumped enough chakra into it. Control was what helped minimize the amount needed to its finest degree. If bunshin took such a small amount that he couldn't attain it, he would hone his control finer and find either information on the jutsu or find someone who could teach it to him. His grandfather loved it when he learned new things, so he wouldn't be mad for too long, although he'd probably get punished. It'd be worth it if he could just get past the bunshin jutsu. He said goodbye to his mother and made his way toward the Hokage Tower to visit his grandfather, with the warning to be back for dinner. Naruto kept his leaves attached to his head as he walked, and he was glad that he had to concentrate on them somewhat. He hated walking through the village. It was the stairs, those god-awful stairs, and the whispers. He could hear them sometimes, like they spoke just loud enough so he could hear them. Demon brat. Look at him, walking like he owns the place. I wish he'd just disappear forever. Hokage-sama must be under the demon's spell. Yondaime-sama must be rolling over in his grave right now. Shish. He might hear us. He hated them somewhat. They talked bad about him and sometimes said mean things for no reason. They never hit him or beat him, but emotional wounds go deeper than physical wounds. Even though he had friends, even though he had a family, he couldn't make new friends, he couldn't play with any other children. It was like he had the plague. He waved to the guards at the door and they smiled down at him. At least the ninjas looked upon him kindly. At the worst, they were indifferent or cold, but never spiteful. He had several that he liked. Anko was always fun to play with and she had those really cool snakes. Genma was fun to be around, and one time Naruto had imitated him by leaning against the wall with his hands in his pockets and a senbon in his mouth, and the ninja had laughed long and hard before ruffling his hair. Hayate was a kind man, but he was sickly and Naruto shied away from him. The Anbu, however, were the weirdest of the bunch. The masks freaked him out sometimes, since he couldn't see their expressions, only the soft voices and slight breathing. Speak of the devil. He grinned and waved at the gray-haired Anbu standing by the Hokage's office door, and the man turned to face him with his dog-faced mask. Inu never talked to him much, but he was okay, he guessed. Hello Naruto. The Hokage is in a meeting right now, so have a seat. He should be through shortly. Inu was one of those who was indifferent at best. His voice never raised, and from what Naruto could tell with his limited dealings with those outside of his small circle, Inu was a very sad man. He seemed to live for his job and not much else. Naruto hopped onto the bench outside the door and swung his feet in time to his heartbeat. Inu sighed behind his mask and prepared himself for the onslaught of questions about to come. Quiet time simply wasn't possible with an inquisitive Naruto around. Hey, Inu-san, do you know how to do the bunshin? Inu's answer was to form the needed hand seal, and a copy of himself appeared. It disappeared just as quickly and Naruto nodded before going back to being silent. 3, 2, 1. Hey, Inu-san, do you know a more powerful version of that jutsu? Inu raised an unseen eyebrow and shuffled his feet. He'd heard from several people the boy was an information sponge, always soaking up what he could. However, he also knew that Sarutobi had forbidden anyone to teach the boy ninjutsu, and he wasn't getting in trouble over a curious brat. He wanted to know what the boy was digging at though. It would help pass the time. Why do you want to know? Naruto frowned and kicked his feet back and forth. He didn't think it would be as easy as asking. I can't do a simple bunshin. I just can't control the amount of chakra needed to make one. I've read before that the more power a jutsu takes, the easier it is to make. That's not entirely true. You need control as well. That's why it's necessary to learn the Academy Bunshin, no matter how useless it is. It promotes control. Yeah, but it shouldn't take such a long time to learn. How long is long? 5 months. Inu whistled low and nodded his head before standing bolt upright again. He could hear the people in the office moving around. Well, that's too bad, kid, but I can't help you. Your grandfather has forbidden anyone from helping you. You know that. Naruto sighed and put his face in his hands. Yeah, I know. I just thought it couldn't hurt to ask. It never hurts to ask, Naruto, but trying to get Inu in trouble. I'm disappointed and ashamed. Naruto grinned at the voice and looked up. But Gigi, it was just a question. He can't possibly teach me anything anyway. All he ever does is stand there. I can hear you, you know. Now, Inu, you know he didn't mean it, did you? I'm sorry. Sarutobi sighed and opened the door more, letting out the man standing behind him. Thank you for coming. I will have an answer for you in the future. That would be most appreciated, Hokage-sama. Naruto watched as the man walked down the hall and was ushered into the office by a slightly annoyed Inu, who shut the door behind him. Naruto sat down in the chair before the desk and looked over the veneer at his grandfather. So, Naruto, what brings you here today? I want to learn something more powerful than the Bunshin. Sarutobi sighed and readied himself for the battle. Naruto, you know what I said. I know. But Gigi, I have a theory. Sarutobi was always happy to listen to a theory, even if he knew he was about to blow holes in it. He bridged his hands and puffed on his ever-present pipe. All right, convince me. Okay, you know how the less chakra a jutsu uses, the more control you have to have, right? Sarutobi nodded his head. Well, then on the other hand, the more chakra a jutsu takes, the less control it takes to bring the jutsu into existence. You still have to have control, but only to fine-tune the jutsu so it doesn't require so much chakra. I can't seem to get the control low enough for the regular Bunshin, so would you please teach me a different one? Sarutobi sat back in his chair and puffed away on his pipe. He was impressed with his grandson's argument. The boy was 5, but he had been taking his studies seriously. He wanted nothing more than to make his family proud, and that was a boon. He had been ecstatic to learn henge and kawarimi and was fast on his way to mastering them. His solid form henge was a wonder as well. That would require more research. But teaching him a more powerful Bunshin. He was only 5. Could he handle the power? Well, of course he could handle the power, but could he handle the responsibility of that power? Would he flaunt it or would he be prudent with it? Sarutobi sighed, a cloud of smoke billowing from his mouth. What would you do if I taught you a better Bunshin? Naruto was ecstatic. This was as close as he'd probably get, but he had to take that leap. I'd work with it until I mastered it and then I'd ask for another. Sarutobi smiled and clenched the pipe in his teeth. He remembered another child who wouldn't rest until he had mastered a jutsu taught to him. Jiraiya had been a stickler for learning. He didn't just learn a jutsu, he bent it, tweaked it, perfected it. He didn't rest until he had made it perfect, and then, he asked for more. Perhaps, it would not be a bad idea. 5 months was a long time not being able to use a Bunshin after all. If I do this, you are not to let others know about it except me and Guy. Understood. Naruto nodded vigorously and grinned happily. Sarutobi grinned back and waved his hand. Now go home, scamp, I have work to do. I'll show you the jutsu tonight. Naruto practically flew home. Sarutobi sighed as he walked inside the house. He could see Naruto in the backyard, balancing on one foot on a tree branch, sticking leaves to multiple parts of his body. He hung his hat and robe on the hook by the door and walked out back. Naruto saw his sensei coming and leapt out of the tree, trembling with anticipation. Sarutobi raised his hand, signaling for silence. The Bunshin I will show you is not to be shown to anyone else, I want to say that again. When you get older, I will tell you when it is okay to use it outside of training. Now then, watch what I do. This will help you form the Tsuchi Bunshin. Sarutobi ran through the hand seals slowly, Naruto mocking him, trying to get them right. Once he was comfortable that the boy had it down, he dropped his hands to the sides. As time goes on, you will find that jutsus such as these will become easier to use and eventually you will be able to use only one seal or none at all. You will know how the chakra is molded and it will help make you a better, unpredictable ninja. Now try to mold the chakra correctly. It took 7 tries, but finally Naruto was able to form a Tsuchi Bunshin. He leapt this way and that, cheering loudly, before he was smacked on the head and stood quietly again. That was very good, but now I expect you to train with this until you have it down. I hadn't meant to teach you a jutsu this advanced this early, but it was necessary I suppose. Practice it more until dinner time. I will come to fetch you. Naruto nodded and flipped through the hand seals again as Sarutobi walked inside. The old Hokage flopped into an armchair and sank back into the aged leather. Here, amongst his sanctuary of old scrolls and books, he felt safe and at peace. No one